Hello book lovers, welcome back to Books with Sakshi. I hope you are doing great and reading some amazing books. In today's video, I'm going to recommend you my top 10 books by Indian authors. Well, there are so many other books which I really want you to read, but do let me know if you enjoy this video and you would like to have some more recommendations from my end of books by Indian authors. But for today's video, I have 10 such amazing book recommendations that you will not regret reading them. The very first author on this list is Preeti Shenoy. I started my journey of reading from Preeti Shenoy's work, and the first book which I read was Life is What You Make It, and this is my very first recommendation for today. So Life is What You Make It by Preeti Shenoy is a very relatable book, I would say, and it was something that really caught my attention at that time. It's a story about a girl who is in 20s and she's really struggling with a few things that are haunting her from her past, and it talks about mental health. It talks about a very specific disorder, that is bipolar disorder, and how someone feels when they are going through it, and how they get better, and the whole journey throughout. And there is definitely a discussion of friendship, love and betrayal and everything in between, and how confused and how in a dilemma people usually in their 20s are. It's best described in this book, and I loved it. And also it feels very thrilling and exciting, as the protagonist of this book is slowly navigating through her journey and slowly finding ways to overcome all the challenges that are in her way. So I really loved it and I highly recommend it. It's a beginners friendly read and you can just read it very easily. If you're a beginner, you will find it very interesting. If you're not a beginner and you haven't read this book yet, you will find something light and something very smooth and inspiring. In short, I loved it and I highly recommend it. So another recommendation also I have from the same author, and that is 100 Little Flames. This is another book which I had to read it because the blurb seemed interesting, and when I read the first book by the author, which was Life is What You Make It, I just felt that I need to read more of her books because there was just something that was attracting me towards it, and I just found her writing style so easy, so smooth, and there was just something magnetic about it. In short, that just pulled me towards her work. So I read this book 100 Little Flames and I immediately liked it. First of all, because it was so different. It discusses about the issues which old people face and how they are treated in certain families. On that aspect, it was quite emotional, and also discusses about the love life of old people, like not in a vulgar way or in a in an indecent way, in a very decent way. The author discusses about it, and it talks about the generational gap, and there's just so much that I found unique in this book. So there is this grandson who goes back to his village for some time, and he spends some time with his grandfather, and he finds a lot of revelations about his grandfather, who is obviously alive. And I just loved it. I loved the unique plot of this book, and I would highly recommend everyone to read it. So now I'm going to recommend you books by Chitra Divakaruni. I love her writing style equally. Like, she has a very different way of writing her books, and I have read 4 of her books, but in today's video I'm just recommending you 2 of her books which I like the most. And the first one is The Palace of Illusions. It's a retelling of Mahabharata told from the perspective of Draupadi, and I guess a lot of you might have already read this book, but in case if you have not still read it, I would definitely recommend you to read it. It's like a masterpiece and I just loved it. And trust me, I read this at a point where I was very new to mythology. And now don't attack me in the comments saying that it's not a mythology, it's like a history. I know, but we are very much familiar, and we are very much habitual to say mythology rather than historical fiction. But I know, so yeah. So I was very new to this genre, but I still understood it, and I was someone who didn't have much knowledge honestly about it. So reading a retelling of something like epic Mahabharata was totally a thrilling experience honestly, and that too told from the perspective of a woman. Draupadi, and I really loved it. I just loved the writing style. I fell in love with it, and I do not have much to say about it except that you must go and read it immediately if you have not read it yet. Another book which I would recommend by Chaitra Devakaruni is The Last Queen. I love this book again. This was a historical fiction, and this is the story of Rani Jindal, who is the last queen of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. And I loved it, again told from the perspective of women, like how things were for Rani Jindal right from her childhood till the time she gets married, and now she has a son, and everything that's happening at that time. I just loved it because the character of Rani Jindal is so strong, so courageous, so rebellious, and I just loved it. And I may sound like a little biased, but there is just something about Chitra Devakaruni's writing that just instantly makes you fall in love with her writing style, fall in love with her characters, and mostly see, here is what I prefer. I mostly prefer to read women centric novels, and I love strong characters, and I've already made a video you can go and check out, which is about strong female characters in fictional books. So I love women centric novels, and so for that reason also I have liked this book. But the story is just so good, so it doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man, you will like it because it's so good. And it's a historical fiction because mostly her two popular books are like The Palace of Illusion and The Forest of Enchantments, which are like the retellings of Mahabharata and Ramayana. So this was something like different, a historical fiction. So I highly recommend it. The fifth recommendation I have, A Hairless Awakening by Kavita Kane. Again, a mythology book which I loved, written from a woman's point of view, and it highlights the importance of education and desires which are sometimes suppressed by women. And there's a lot more to the story, but mainly at that time when I read this book, I was exploring more and more mythology, and especially the ones that are written from the point of view of women. So I came across this book and I just loved it. It shows that how as a woman you should stand up, you should take your stand, you should take your stand for everything you feel is right for you, and you should get the education, you should learn everything you want in this world. And it just felt so inspiring and so motivating at that point of time. There are other things as well in this book, like there are like issues of family, there is love, there's betrayal, there's infidelity, and some other stuffs as well involved in this book. But I loved it. I found it so good and so on point, like how the book ended. So I highly recommend it. Next book on my recommendation list is Till the Last Breath, written by Durjoy Datta. I have only read one book of him so far, and I'm so glad. Like, this was like the first book which I have read of him, and I really loved it. It was not a love story, and I found it so emotional, and by the end of this book, like, I was really crying, like really crying. It was so good, and I just loved it. So it highlights the importance of life, and that you're so beautiful, so valuable, and you're so precious to have this life in which you can do so many amazing things. And it's a very relatable, engaging, and I would say sentimental book which I read at that time. By the end, it just makes you believe that humankind is so beautiful, and there are good people out there, and there is still goodness that exists in this world. This is what I felt after reading this book, and definitely so emotional. So keep tissues ready with you when you will read this book. Alright, so moving ahead, I want to recommend you one book by Ajay K. Pandey, and it is You Are the Best Wife. I read this at the time when I didn't have the money to buy the books, honestly, and I read it in the PDF form in my phone. I mean, I cannot even imagine now reading anything on my phone because of so small fonts. But at that time, I read this book on my phone as a PDF, and I was so involved in this book because it was so emotional. It is author's real life story only, as far as I know, but told in a very fictional way. It's his journey of finding a girl who he likes, and then confessing their feelings to each other, and then finally getting married. And that had like a lot of problems. Like there were like a lot of problems convincing their family and everything. So after they get married, something happens which I cannot say in this book because it will then be a spoiler. But oh my god, it was so emotional, and I still remember reading and finishing this book late at night. It must be around like 12 or 12:30 at that time, and I was crying like hell. I don't know, like in the recent times I haven't cried reading a book like that. I mean, that was like the height. I don't cry like that usually, but I really cried so much. And maybe because at that time I was a new reader, so I didn't read that many emotional books. So that this book kind of made me so emotional. But now that I've read a lot of emotional books, I usually don't cry that easily. It's not that I'm like very cold hearted or something, but it's just that you get, I don't know what's the thing, but recently I haven't cried reading a book. I have become emotional, but not up to the point where I start crying. So this book I definitely recommend, and you must read it. If you're a beginner, read it. If you're not a beginner, then still you can read it, and you can see if you like it. Now I have read 3 or 4 books by Ajay K. Pandey, but another book which I would like to recommend is Her Last Wish. Again, this is a beginners friendly book, and you can avoid reading Ajay K. Pandey's book if you do not want to read it. I'm not saying that everyone must read it, but I personally found these books very emotional. So another book which I would recommend of Ajay K. Pandey would be Her Last Wish, and this is not in the series or something, but you should read this book if you have read like the You Are the Best Wife. So Her Last Wish is all about his wife's last wishes, which she has written down on a certain paper, and they're like around 7 to 8 wishes, and he is now determined to fulfill all those wishes. So like this is just the basic plot, and there's a lot of things which happen. So I found this book also interesting, but I read these books when I was a new reader, and they really helped me getting into reading. So this is what I feel like: when you start with some basic level books, when you start with something that's smooth, easy and engaging and interesting, you find the motivation to continue reading it, rather than when you start reading something that's altogether very difficult and very complex, and you really need a lot of attention to read whatever you are reading. So I feel these kind of books really come as a rescue in those times, and you can develop a reading habit using these books, because these are the only books which I read as a beginner, and now I shift to like every kind of book and every genre you just give me and I can read it. Moving further, I would like to recommend you books by Malti Ramchandra. A lot of you might not know her, but I was so lucky to have the opportunity to read 4 or 5 of her books, and in today's video I would like to recommend you 2 of her books which I loved so much, and one of them is Legend of Kuldhara. It's a story which the author has taken inspiration from the real life events, and then she has turned it into a fiction according to her imagination, and I just loved it. Like Kuldhara is considered to be a place where ghosts exist, and where a lot of bad has already happened, because overnight the whole village vanished and no one knows till date where they all went. So everyone has their own theory like what must have happened, but it is considered to be a haunted place now. So when I read the blurb, I thought that this is going to be horror fiction or something of that sort, but it was not. And whatever it was, I really loved it. I loved the imagination of the author, like how the story could be, or like what could have happened, like that. So I really loved it, and it was very emotional and very sentimental. You must read it if you have not read it, and I'm sure you will like it. Another book which I really loved by the same author is The Wheel Turned. It's the story of a young woman who gets married against her wish, and but now things are, getting settled and everything. She's finally finding peace, but now her husband has to leave for a war and she's left all alone, and suddenly a news comes that her husband has totally vanished. Like, he has neither died nor wounded, and like no one knows where he is. And it was quite interesting to read, and the protagonist in this book is like constantly waiting for her partner to come back, and then a lot of things already happened at that time which could have distracted her. But the twist at the end really made me happy. It was something that I really wanted, and not any other way I could have, accepted it. So it was just so perfect and I loved it. I found it very relatable. The writing style was so good, and this book was written before The Legend of Kuldhara. Like, this is the author's very early work which I got the chance to read, and I just loved it. It's a romance novel, no doubt, but there's definitely nothing cheesy or cringe or anything like that. You will like it so much. Well, that is it for today's recommendation. I have recommended you to 10 books by Indian authors today. If you would like to have more such recommendations, do let me know in the comment section below and I will make a part 2 of it. If you like this video, please do give this video a thumbs up, and also do subscribe to my channel and hit that bell icon. Also, do tell me what's your favorite book by the Indian author and any book which you would like to recommend by the Indian author. And I'll see you in the upcoming videos. Until next time, take care and keep reading.